please tell us in detail about this Brahmin genocide, because it sounds like sort of exaggeration to me.
Mhm.
I live in Mumbai. I spoke to a lot of people, and people have no idea about it. People who have been born here, people who have lived here, people who are now 75, 80 years old, almost the age of India, even in their memory. And my father-in-law is 92, 93, and he was there. He told me that yes, people died, but then
Mhm.
he did not elaborate as if it was a major chapter in India's history. Why, if it is true, why it was hidden from us? Who was behind hiding it? Who was it helping? So please tell us in detail.
Yeah. So I think a very sad, precursor to what happened in Delhi in 1984, the pogrom of the Sikhs after Indira Gandhi's assassination. This was like a trailer to that. And in 1948, where because Gandhi ji was murdered by a group of people, there were 6, 7 accused, majority of whom were Maharashtrian Brahmins, Chitpavan Brahmins in particular. The brunt of the violent repercussions of that murder were felt by, of course, the Hindu Mahasabha and the RSS also, but also Maharashtrian Brahmins across the state of Maharashtra. And very curiously, the caste of the murderer that leaked into the press within a few hours of the murder. So somebody had also, ensured that comes out, that which caste these Godse belong to. And the press in India largely, blackened out any mention of the carnage against the Brahmins. It was actually the New York Times. The New York Times journalist Robert Trumbull, who reported on 31st of January 1948 for the first time that communal riots, he called it communal riots, though it was actually not a riot, it was actually a pogrom against a particular community, was sweeping Bombay. That's what he mentions. Now, in the 1950s, we had this foreign scholar called Maureen Patterson, who had come to Maharashtra to do research about this episode, and she
Hmm.
writes that, and probably that's the one documented fact, other than, of course, Dr. Conrad Elst also, who mentions this episode. But other than that, there is very little documentary evidence, because she also says that she was denied access to most of the documents by the then Maharashtra government, the Bombay police, and so on. And she says the exact number of deaths or the injuries that were suffered will never be known, because cases were never filed, FIRs were not registered, and it was always whitewashed from public memory as though it never happened. Now, based on some of the findings she puts together, which I quote extensively in the book, the damage to property itself was something like 6 to 10 crores, which she said is a gross underestimate. 6 to 10 crores in 1948 would have been a huge amount. So it began initially in Bombay, in Pune, in Nagpur, and then spread to the Desh, the southwestern, the Deccan Plateau of Satara, Belgaum, Kolhapur, Miraj, Sangli, the Patwardhan princely states, and all of that. And in Nagpur, it almost became an amalgam of anti-Hindu Mahasabha, anti-RSS, and also anti-Samyukta Maharashtra movement, all culminating with the common thread of anti-Brahminism. And so, there were they're just fragments of information we can get together. I have put some of it in the book, where in Bombay it said during this 15 of them were killed and more than 50 plus injured. In Pune, about 50 plus were killed. In Kolhapur, Bhalji Pendarkar, the famous film director, his studio was burned down because he was a Maharashtrian, Brahmin. Now, in Kolhapur, the Maharaja of Kolhapur set up a commission of inquiry under Justice Koyaji, who was a retired Bombay High Court judge, in June 1948, and a 95-page report of Justice Koyaji dwelt in depth about the intensity of these pogrom that was happened. Villages were ethnically cleansed out, like probably what happened with the Kashmiri Pandits, where they were driven out of their villages. Similarly, Brahmins were driven out of most of the villages. They either entered Mysore state, or they went to Bombay, Pune, the main cities, so that they could escape this persecution. And why it was whitewashed was because it was led actively by several leading congressmen of the time, and ironically by people who were trained all their life in the tenets of non-violence, actually become so violent when the epistole of non-violence is murdered, and very heinously so. And in fact, it started with just antipathy for the anybody who had the surname Godse, who would be caught and burnt alive. But later on, the antipathy spread to all Chitpavan Brahmins, and later to even the Deshasthas and other sub communities of the Maharashtrian Brahmin community. And the actual, the detail of this is given by Dwarka Prasad Mishra, who was a former Congress Home Minister, Congress leader, very senior Congress leader. He was a Home Minister of what was then Central Provinces, now Madhya Pradesh. He says this, and I quote again from what he writes in his memoirs, that although hardly half a dozen Maharashtrian Brahmins were involved in Godse's crime, a very large number of them had to pay for it. Those who indulged in these unlawful activities also included a large number of congressmen belonging to non-Brahmin communities. In fact, in Nagpur and Berar, the troublemakers were mostly congressmen, some being even office bearers of the various Congress committees. Among those who were arrested by the police, there were more than 100 congressmen, and I was immediately subjected to pressure for their release. In a meeting of prominent congressmen of Nagpur, I had to face severe criticism when they threatened to take their complaint to the Home Minister Sardar Patel, that I had to tell them to bring a directive for me from Delhi, unquote. So this was the Congress Home Minister saying it was Congress office bearers who were leading these mobs. And nothing was done after that. Of course, Sardar Patel admonishes the Chief Minister of Bombay, B.G. Kher, saying he was not happy with the way the situation was dealt with. But as I said, no justice, no retribution, even FIRs were not lodged. And it was almost made to feel that, oh, this is exaggeration. There was nothing like this that happened at all. But in the course of my research, Vivekji, I put out a tweet saying, I'm doing this and I would like people to come out with any of their family histories, their memories, because history is not just about documents. It's also about oral narratives. It's about folk traditions, folk histories. So when documents fail you, folk literature will never fail you. So I was overwhelmed with the deluge of information that came to me. It's hundreds and hundreds of emails.
Same thing, I had put an appeal for Tashkent Files, and
yes.
Two people be connected with so many people. Yeah.
Crowdsourcing. Yeah. So a lot of them wrote to me giving very minute details of what happened to their grandparents and that generation. In fact, a couple of them, one Mr. Gopal Kulkarni, I was actually very fortunate. He was an eyewitness of all of this. He was, I think, 15 years old then, about 90 years old, and he just about a month ago or so passed away. And I actually, on a Zoom call like this, I interviewed him, and he told me his first person account of how, again, Congress mobs attacked his house. Women were also, molested, killed. He lost his grandmother. Even children were not spared. They were all, the houses were burnt, and all of this that happened when, they probably did not have anything to do with politics. It was just the fact that they belonged to this community. Also, what was very distressing was that several people, I included, some of these first person accounts in the appendix to the book. Probably for the first time, a victim's voice is also coming out in print, saying, the courts may have failed them, the police and the justice system may have failed them, but at least the least we can do as a tribute is talk about it and not even deny them that pain, while not giving justice is a double adding insult to injury. So at least, for the first time, their voices, the trials and tribulations they faced, whether I could put it out. Many people refused. In fact, they did not want me to put it out in print. But a majority of them, while they gave me permission to, bring out their voices in print, they also said, kindly keep our names out. We would like to go out anonymous. And I was like, why? This was 1990. A lot of anonymous. Only one or two brave hearts were, okay, you can take my name or my grandfather's name and so on. But then a lot of others said, even now, there is Dar Ka Mahal, where, the people who led those mobs, their descendants or those very parties, and many of them named them, I do not want to name them either in the book or here, are in positions of power or very powerful leaders even now in Maharashtra.